Hi there, and welcome to the latest episode of Off the Data Provided. I am, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. Welcome back, everyone. I did not post 2 weeks ago. We usually post every first and third Wednesday of the month. I was in Japan, and when I realized that I could either record it early or maybe record it in Japan, an episode, I knew the sound quality wasn't going to be great, so I just opted to take a little vacation from the podcast. I so appreciate all of you who have stuck with me, even though we had a little bit of a hiatus, but everybody does deserve a little break every now and then. With that said, today's episode, I'm actually just going to talk about adult friendships, how to foster and form them, and how to maneuver through them. I received quite a few Ask Dr. Shepards on this topic about adult friendships, and instead of just doing a few Ask Dr. Shepards around it, I thought I would just merge the questions that they had into this conversation on friendship. So, of course, we will revisit just some key terms as well as theories. One, of course, will be the friendship formula that we've talked about, which includes investment, emotional closeness, trust, and support. We'll also talk about the life cycle of friendships again to give people a reminder. And we will also revisit the concept of friends of the road and or friends of the heart to flesh out our discussion. So because I am merging a few Ask Dr. Shepards that I received, we won't be doing one today. But if you do have an Ask Dr. Shepard that you would like to ask me, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So delving into a discussion on adult friendship, first and foremost, I think it's important to spell out the friendship formula or revisit it for those that have been following along. So if you are aware, the friendship formula that I think about has 4 key ingredients. It's investment, emotional closeness, trust, and support. And what's really unique about friendships, as we've talked about before on the podcast, but just to underscore, is that friendships are unique, individual, interpersonal relationships that really don't have any rules, institutions, or laws that help us create or maintain them. So it really is the wild, wild west when we think about friendships and how we can maneuver these friendships or how we can build them or how maybe we let them go or deteriorate. Friendship, of course, as I have shared before, is something I love talking about, love researching, love theorizing and thinking about because of the fact that these relationships are unique. And what is unique about them is no 2 friendships are alike, and nobody has to do quote unquote friendships, communicate within friendships the same way. And oftentimes, as we've discussed on this podcast before, if you have really deep, meaningful friendships, you oftentimes communicate and engage with these friends differently. We know that people sometimes have different friend groups where maybe on birthdays or special occasions, they try and merge those friend groups and see if it works or not. But even within different friend groups, you oftentimes communicate with people a little differently. So I know, for instance, I have several different friend groups, and I communicate with those friend groups differently, but also I communicate with each individual in those friend groups differently. So I think about my Philly friend group, people who are here in Philly. Some people I communicate with more as a quote unquote parental figure, if you would, right? They're significantly younger than me. They're looking to me for guidance, but we still have a friendship. Others are maybe even older than me or around my age, and we don't communicate in that way. So even though we're in maybe a larger Philly friend group, how I even communicate with individuals within that friend group is a little different. But we'll pull back a little further. And of course, first and foremost with a friendship is that investment. That part of that formula. So investment, as we have talked about before, are the things, the ingredients that you put into a friendship. So clearly time, feelings, energies, thoughts, maybe even money are what you are putting in to hopefully build that friendship. And oftentimes with friendships, you're looking for an ROI. And so what is that? A return on investment. So if you feel as if you're not getting anything out of that friendship, it's not as beneficial as maybe you viewed it as, or it's become more one-sided, typically that friendship will dissolve. So I know I have been guilty, as we've talked about before on this podcast, of overly investing in friendships. And I've talked about it before where Dr. Anderson, Janine, who will be on the podcast this season, and we talked about one of those friendships early on when I moved to Philadelphia. And she said, as long as you're comfortable and aware that this friend that you're really investing in, that you're spending a lot of time with, if you know that they're never going to be able to match that level of investment, just who they are based off what you've told me, and she even met this person, she was like, then fine, I'm happy for you, continue to engage in this friendship. But she said, as someone, with a little more wisdom, especially over almost a decade ago at that point, where there will probably come a time where you get tired of it, where you're always the one initiating, you're always the one maneuvering things, you're always the one planning things. And so she said, when that moment comes, that'll really be a litmus test for your friendship. Will the person pick up the slack or will it deteriorate? And what happened, some might say unfortunately, I say fortunately, is the friendship ended. So clearly investment is really, really important. And the more that you invest and the other person invests at the beginning sets a really strong foundation for a friendship. So one friend who I invested a lot in and he also invested a lot in is my, primo Jaime. When I used to live in LA, when I was doing my PhD, Jaime and I would probably see each other 4 to 5 times a week. There are only 7 days in a week. And that was for roughly 4 years straight, where we hung out and saw each other for that amount of time. The only times we would probably go stretches without seeing one another is if he was on vacation, I was on vacation, or at a conference. Other than that, we saw each other like clockwork. We both loved the movies, so an easy thing was we were at the movies every single week. Because we have that strong foundation and investment, now we are some years removed. I would say almost 15 years removed since we became friends. We don't talk as frequently or hang out as frequently because he does still live in Los Angeles and I now live on the East Coast in Philadelphia. But because we have that strong foundation, when we do communicate, which is probably every 2 to 3 months, and usually it's for a substantial amount of time on the phone, it's like we are picking up where we left off. So because we have invested a lot in the relationship, especially at the beginning, it allows us some leeway and grace when it comes to the current investment. If he called me right now, I would pick up. If I called him and he could pick up, he would. There's never really phone tag with us. It's only phone tag if I'm asleep or he's asleep because of that level of intense investment that we did. And what's really important to think about with investment, especially early on in friendships, and I think this is where some people struggle and where some of the Ask Dr. Shepards I receive come in, is knowing how much to invest and also on the flip side, making sure that you are continuing to invest. Because what happens, especially with these early friendships, is someone's investing or you both are trying to invest and maybe you make plans and then someone cancels and then the person who canceled, you maybe expect for them to make the plans, but maybe they were relying on you to make the plans because you're the planner and you decide you're not going to plan. And then because neither of you are investing as early on in your friendship, it just dissipates or goes away. I know I've experienced that somewhat recently. I had made a newer friend in New York City and we were hanging out when I was in New York. He came to Philly once. We had a good time. We were kind of, more texting. We had a disagreement when it came to text around politics, desire, dating, and nobody picked up the slack after the disagreement, right? I didn't, nor did he. That's been months ago. So if he was to reach out now, I would be amenable or willing to engage. I'm not inclined to reach out just due to where we left that conversation. Not going to delve into the conversation, but from my point of view, there was nowhere else to go and it wasn't an agree to disagree type of conversation, nor was it we need to have a further conversation for me to understand your point because I got it. So that's kind of, it died on the vine, as they might say. So that is investment. Of course, the next one in the formula is emotional closeness. So this is through dialogue, self-disclosure, shared activities. We know traditionally, quote unquote, and I say that, very quote unquote, that usually female-centered friendships are through dialogue and self-disclosure, and male-centered friendships are oftentimes through shared activities. I do believe this is changing and isn't an absolute, but some of the data around friendship formation shows that women tend to form their friendships through dialogue and self-disclosure, where men more so do it through shared activities. And I say more so because it's clear that it's not women do this, men do that, because I form a lot of my friendships through self-disclosure and dialogue, as well as some shared activities, right? To me, it's a mixture of these two. If I think about friends that I've made from Twitter, especially, I think about Zamir and I think about Darius, two of my best friends, where it began as shared activities. We were watching shows in common. For Zamir, it was Scandal, or maybe How to Get Away with Murder. And for Darius, it was Queen of the South. And then we built off of those shared activities of watching and live tweeting them and engaging and following each other through then self-disclosure and dialogue in the DMs and then on phone calls and then in person. And so clearly it wasn't just shared activities, nor was it just dialogue and self-disclosure. The next ingredient, of course, is trust. So this is not betraying someone's confidence, and as well as doing what you say you will do. So if you're having kitchen table talk with a friend, it stays kitchen table talk. And I know it's funny with Darius, we'll be talking, and sometimes he will say, right, and this isn't speaking out of turn, he will be telling me something, and then he'll be like a prerequisite, and then he'll be like, oh, I forgot, I'm talking to you, I don't have to do a prerequisite. I'm like, exactly, right? You trust me, I'm not going to betray your confidence, and I trust you, you're not going to betray my confidence. So we speak very freely and say things that maybe if we said them in public would be looked at a different way, or would be frowned against, or would be questioned on the language. But we're having more free-flowing, conscious, unconscious communication and thought process because we trust one another. And then, of course, there's the last ingredient, which is support, which is both verbal, saying things like, you've got this, I believe in you, and then nonverbal, maybe rubbing someone's back, holding their hand, looking into their eyes and kind of smizing. Shout out to Tyra Banks, I guess. And showing up physically for them if they have a big moment that you can be there for. I know when I was getting my PhD, my best friend, basically sister, Kiara, came a week before to be with me, to get me through that last hurdle, because in part she couldn't actually be there on the physical day where I was defending. But her being there the week leading up honestly meant more than being there on that actual day, right? She helped me through that last hurdle. And I, in turn, when she was getting ready to defend, did the same thing. And my parents actually tagged along, and we were all there to support her in the last coming of days running up. So we can see that these are 4 ingredients that are going to be really crucial for any type of friendship that you foster, that you want to maintain. And issues that arise in friendships, and especially adult friendships, are primarily around investment. You start investing, and then investment gets tricky. So I know, especially being, an adult, I'm not knocking on 40, but closer to 40 than I am 30, is I give a lot of people grace when it comes to investment because there's just a whole lot going on. And when things calm down for people, they oftentimes come up for air and will be there. But I say that also giving grace to people is you give grace to people who have quote unquote earned it. And for me, earning it looks like one thing, and earning it might look like something else for somebody else. Perfect example. I had met a new friend here in Philly, and we hadn't been friends for more than 3 months. And he said, hey, I need a mental break. I, need to go MIA for a moment. And when I pop back up, I'll be sure to hit you up. Great. You alerted me. Great, effective, clear communication that this is what you're going to do. So do it. And when he popped back up, it was fine in terms of, he said, hey, I'm back. Can we hang out this date and this time? I say, hey, I'm not free then. What about another time? You're the one popping back up. You're asking. So here it is. And then he never responded. I didn't feel inclined to follow up because, as I said, we had only had initial friendship of about 3 months, and so he clearly didn't feel the need to respond back, and the friendship kinda died on the vine again. So the lack of investment, that break, okay. Meanwhile, if a friend of years or decades, right? I've now had friends for close to 2 plus decades in my life that I'm still really good friends with. If they needed a month break, a year break, fine. And when they pop back up, if they did that thing and then they didn't follow up, I probably would follow back up with them because we've invested years together, not months, right? So for me, the litmus test about the grace is, well, how long have you been in my life? How long have we been close? What does that look like? So clearly 3 months of being friendly and you took a break. Okay, I'm not really going to do a lot of emotional or physical labor or work to reignite that friendship that you asked for a break. But when it does come to those friendships, as we said, right, people have hit me up asking about how to form friendships, or I'm not at a loss for friendships. I literally was talking to one of my decades long friends, Kiera, recently just about friendships because this is a topic I love to talk about. And I was telling her, like my friendship card is kind of full. I'm never opposed to making new friends because I think that's the beauty in life is people can push your thinking. I have a newer friend, Cameron or Cam, who's come into my life these last few months. And, I push his thinking. He pushes my thinking on different topics. And I think that's a beauty in friendship because nobody has to do life the same way. And so sometimes it's nice to get a reminder of that in somebody who maybe doesn't fully align with a lot of your values. Of course, he aligns with my core values, but when it comes to dating, when it comes to relationships and things like that, we diverge on a lot. And so to me, it's actually fun to talk to him about these things. And I probably will have him on the podcast. You can hear some of his takes and point of views. And so with that said, when it comes to that life cycle of friendships, of course, we have an initial encounter. So either it's planned or accidental. In this initial encounter, you check to see whether you have common ground, values, or interests that exist. And if an invitation is placed beyond this initial encounter, then maybe you have a fledgling friendship that is launching. And so this invitation can be maybe beyond your social roles. So maybe your coworkers, maybe your classmates, maybe you run into each other all the time at the gym. So if you make this invitation, hey, why don't we get lunch? Or do you want to grab a quick bite or go to a happy hour? Or you want to catch a movie, right? This initial thing could launch you into a friendship. So when I think about initial encounters, especially for me, the majority of places I meet people now is online because how I maneuver in the world, I am very much headphones in, mask on, shades on. So kind of don't hear no, don't see no, don't speak no. Though if you do approach me or say anything, I'm super friendly and engaging. But kind of when I'm out in the world, I'm out to do the business I set out to do and I'm coming home. So for me, initial encounters are oftentimes online. Maybe you'll say something and we'll engage, we'll go back and forth. Twitter is usually the app I use the most. So maybe you have a tweet that I saw or a friend responded to and I engage. Maybe you engage with me and we go back and forth a little bit. Maybe you follow me. Then oftentimes if someone follows me, I will go to their page and see kind of what do they tweet about, where are they? Okay, things are aligned. I'll follow back, or maybe vice versa. I follow them first. Maybe they follow me. And then we see where that goes. We continually engage. Do things move into the DMs? And then from that, do we feel comfortable enough to maybe exchanging phone numbers, texting, talking on the phone? That's kind of how it evolves in the digital space for me. So if you decide, of course, to invest, to do that self-disclosure of your feelings, your thoughts, your values, your attitude, your interests, you then are shifting your relationship into what we call a nascent friendship. And so nascent friendships are when you begin to think of ourselves as friends and begin to work out the rules of your friendship relationship. And this is where, of course, relational rules come into play. What is really important when we're in this nascent friendship stage where people begin to think of the other person as a friend is you begin to consider them. So for me, when I'm making plans or I like to go to the movies, oh, do I think so-and-so will want to see this? Let me invite them. Oh, I want to check this event out. Oh, I think so and so might like this. Let me invite them. I'm considering you. If you're new in my life, then it's a nascent friendship. Friendship, though, means something. And I oftentimes push back on people, especially in my life, who refer to people who are maybe acquaintances or maybe mutuals, as we call them online, as friends, because you're not really doing what is required, right? As I've highlighted, that the ingredients of the friendship formula. You're not self-disclosing. You're not really doing emotional closeness. You're not trusting them. You're not supporting them. You're just kind of tweeting back and forth with them. Okay. If you want to call them a friend, then call me something different, right? And I actually have said this to Darius, particularly, where my friend, I'm like, oh, how long have you known them? I said, well, call me something different, right? And so we basically consider each other family now. So I'm not even in that friendship idea with Darius or really any of my very close friends. I consider them more so siblings than I do friends. But with that nascent friendship, as I said, you hopefully start to work out those relationship rules. But those relationship rules are oftentimes unspoken understandings that regulate how we interact. And what's going to be really important when it comes to these rules, as I said, they're unspoken, is if we really want to have effective friendships, let's speak some of those rules into existence, because how I do friendship is going to be different than how you do friendship, then different how your friend does friendship, then different how somebody else does friendship. And it doesn't mean how I do it is wrong, how you do it is wrong, how someone else does it is wrong. But it's important that we're on the same page, because just because you're friends doesn't mean they agree to your friendship rules. So I know, for instance, as I've shared before on the podcast, I let any kind of nascent friend know. I let Cameron know this, right? He's my most recent nascent friendship that's turning more into a friendship, that I am all for romantic love, right? I oftentimes help my friends figure out, maneuver in that space, because it is an area of expertise of mine. But what I won't tolerate is if you get into a relationship and then all of a sudden you have no time for me. Now, I fully understand and get if, let's say, we're the type of friends that talk several times a week, that maybe we don't talk several times a week. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe it's every other week. But it doesn't mean we go from 60 to 0. And that, unfortunately, has happened to me, as I've shared before on a podcast, with a close friend here in Philadelphia, where we used to see each other several times a week. He then got into a relationship and I didn't hear from him, didn't see him. I've shared before the cookie story where I made his favorite cookies for his birthday. And I told him, he said, oh, I'll swing by with my boo to pick him up, on this day. And I said, great. That day came and went. I hit him up and it was like, oh, I'm busy, but I'll come by. I'll let you know. I said, great. Cookie stayed in the freezer for a few months. I never heard anything. Then I started eating the cookies. The cookies went away. Still never heard anything from my friend. And then my friend hit me up because I sent a big blast about some vaccines and I had to connect to get people in for vaccines. And even though I had realized that our friendship would run the course, I still care about the person. So I offered them that and they kind of responded to that. And that was that. So we want to make sure that we spell out those relationship rules. So clearly, any friend I have, I always spell out the thing about, romantic relationship versus friendship. I don't believe that I'm a placeholder and that I'm your friend and we hang out all the time. Now you got a boo and now you don't see me at all. I fully understand that we're not going to see each other as frequently, but as I said before, it doesn't go from 60 to 0 or 100 to 0. So we know, of course, that one of the most common reasons for deterioration stems from lack of investment, either from one or both parties involved. So the cookie story shows the lack of investment from my friend there, and therefore me pulling back my investment as well. You said you're going to follow up about when you're going to do the cookies? Great. Months went by and you hadn't followed up, hadn't reached out to me. Okay, we're done. So, of course, with deterioration, we know that people get pulled in different directions by other friendships, family, career demands, and these things hinder friendships because friends, unfortunately, are the first interpersonal relationship that gets placed on the back burner in our society in the United States of America. We know that, yes, friends are important and they're vital to a full lived life, but when hardships happen, when career is going off, they're the thing that we lack investment in the first round, right? It's not even almost a question for most people. It's like, oh, my family really needs me. So, yeah, my friends, I just can't be here. Or my career is going crazy. Yeah, my friends, I just need. And so I think, as I've said before, the grace. So, as I've said, if we've been friends for a while, I give you grace when those things are happening. I have a friend right now going through a big career thing. He's been posting on social media a lot, like coming home from the office well after midnight. And I'm like, of course I haven't really heard from this person. Of course we haven't really hung out. One, because I was in Japan the last 2 weeks. But two, now that I'm back, right, you're going through this big career thing where he would be someone I would go see some movies with because we're both on the A list. Shout out to that, even though the price is increasing. So, of course, right, his career demands are taking over right now. But I know once I checked in with him that, those are coming to a close. And because we are friends and I care about him, I told him, oh, I'm putting a care package together for you. I'll give it to you when I see you next, right? Just to, revitalize you. So we know, of course, getting pulled in different directions is one of the reasons. And then, of course, as we said before, lack of support or investment is a huge other reason of why friendships deteriorate. So a lot of adults struggle with friendships, building them and maintaining them because of these things. And so for me, I'm not someone that struggles with building or maintaining friendships. One in part, and I will say we have to be mindful of our privileges, is the career that I have. I work physically on campus 2 days a week, right? I'm knocking on wood. You probably can't hear it, but I'm knocking on wood. I work 2 days a week on campus. So that means I have 5 days where I don't have to physically be somewhere. That gives me more flexibility to have friends in different states, in different countries, in different parts of the city, and it also allows me to maybe take more of the brunt of traveling. I don't necessarily mind that as long as I have good music on. Anybody who knows me knows I love a train. Train is my favorite way to travel. So I have no issue, right? When I had a really good friend in New York, I literally had no issue of hopping on the Amtrak, hopping on NJ Transit to go to New York, hopping on the subways to see my friend. I had no issue with that. My issue stemmed from I was always the one planning. And so I think we need to be mindful when it comes to lack of support, lack of investment. Well, what are we asking people to do? But also, what am I doing? What am I putting in to help foster or build or maintain this relationship? So if you're someone who's in adulthood and struggling to, one, make friends, I think you need to break down that friendship formula and see where you have shown up strongly, as well as maybe where you haven't shown up as strongly. But second, what are you looking for these people to do? So as I've always maintained, right, I have a more freedom and flexibility. So travel isn't a big issue. But hey, if let's say we're forming a friendship and I'm commuting a lot to see you, well, then maybe it would make sense if you put some money down on it for me, right? If I'm always taking the Amtrak, and Lord knows if you're on the East Coast, Amtrak can be really cheap, but it can also be very expensive depending on how you book. So if I'm coming to you, maybe you're like, hey, here's a little money for your Amtrak just to help you out. I know for one of my friends who comes to see me and money is tight for him, I just buy his Amtrak. It's not a big deal for me, but he's making the investment of his time to get to the Amtrak, to be on the Amtrak, and then once he gets off the Amtrak, either to walk to where I live or to hop on a bus. So sure, I'm maybe paying $50 round trip for your Amtrak, but I have no issue with that. We're investing, we're building, we're maintaining our friendship. So I think it's important to figure out what have you been doing in your friendships and where have you been coming up short, as well as think about, well, where have other people been coming up short? And have I given them too much grace? Have I brought it to their attention? Have I just let things ghost in silence? I think a lot of people are conflict averse, unfortunately, in our current society and how to set up. And for me, the best thing and the thing I cherish the most about my friends is that they are unfiltered when it comes to our communication, and they are unfiltered when maybe I've done something that has upset them, and I'm unfiltered when they've done something that has upset me. So we can maneuver and move through that rather quickly and get back to the business at hand of being friends. So I know, for instance, I believe I've talked about it before, but Kiara and I have had conflicts here and there, but oftentimes she never remembers the conflicts because we maneuver them and we work through them very well. Sometimes we'll need a moment or two right, to gather our thoughts. Then we'll come back together and we'll talk about it. And as I've shared before, sometimes, she'll interrupt me or I'll interrupt her. And, I'm usually like, hey, I listen to you fully, make your point, please listen to me, right? And she respects that and does that. And then we work through it. We figure out what the issue is, how we can move forward. We enact that and we move on. And this has been a friendship of, 15, 16 years, right? Knocking on 20 years. And we have modeled this great behavior when it comes to conflict. So, of course, it can be very scary the first time conflict arises in a new interpersonal relationship because you don't know how that person is going to react or engage. But it is going to be really vital for the health of your friendship that you understand that conflict is a place where you can love, support, and trust somebody from. If I have an issue with you, I want you to bring it. I want to be able to bring it to your attention. I shouldn't feel afraid to bring it to your attention because ultimately I'm bringing this issue to your attention because it will help us grow our relationship. If I'm hiding things from you, if I don't want to talk to you about things, to me, that's maybe a yellow flag. Well, why is it that I don't want to say that to my friend? This is my friend. Why is it that I am nervous to bring this up? So also think about that. Why is it that you were nervous in those past relationships? And if you are someone that's conflict averse, then when you're when you are forming and when you're in that nascent friendship and you're talking about those relationship rules, let's talk about conflict. How do you like to deal with conflict? How should we bring it up? Some people, as I've talked about before, right, Jaime is someone where I have to ease into it, butter him up, and then we go into it. Where Janine, right, Dr. Anderson, we're straight no chaser. We just say it out the gate and we deal with it. And that's literally been our friendship from jump. And I will always remember it's ingrained in my mind the first time I kind of really had a conversation with her and she was talking about a man in her past and I had barely known her and I was just straight no chaser. I was like, maybe this man isn't your man. And she looked at me dead in my face like, who the blank are you in my house telling me this? And then she was like, well, wait a minute. And then we had a great conversation and we have been bosom buddies ever since, right? That's my big sis. So I think it's really important to figure out how you do conflict and really spell that out, especially if you are conflict averse. So we know, of course, with that deterioration, that brings us to kind of this last little tidbit I want to talk about of friendships of the road and friendships of the heart. So we know friendships of the road change as we move along. So those are maybe your high school friends, your college friends, your grad school friends, people you were friends at this particular job, or people you were friendly with because you went to this gym, or people you were friendly with because you lived in this neighborhood or this city. And then when you move, you kind of lose contact with them. Maybe you make your best intentions to stay in each other's lives, and social media can make that easier, where you can still watch people's stories, you can engage with them, but you're probably not hanging out with them as frequently, maybe not talking on the phone with them as much either. And so they're going to change as we move along. Those are those reason or season friends. And then you have friends of the heart. And so these are the people that remain close to us regardless of our physical distance between us. These are your lifetime friends. So I know from college, right, I have one lifetime friend, I would say. Well, I should say that, where I would say one lifetime friend from my class, right? I have several lifetime friends who were in different classes than me, but one person in particular that has survived out of that. Or even grad school, right? I have a few friends who are lifetime friends from that, right? Kiara, Janine, for instance. And, other people I'm friendly with, right? If I see something about them on social media or they post something, right, I'll slide in their DMs, we'll talk, we'll say things. But not everybody moves forward. And that's also okay. I think a disservice we also do in adulthood in particular is we are looking for lifetime friends in everyone. And that is just not going to be humanly possible because the amount of labor, the amount of work that is required for a lifetime friend is different, I would say, than a friend of the road. And that is okay. It doesn't mean that those friends aren't as valuable. It doesn't mean they're not as meaningful. It doesn't mean they're not as impactful. But what it does mean is the level and the degree of investment that you're willing and able to give is going to be different. As I've shared on this podcast before, I am someone who does not do short phone call conversations typically. So those friends of the lifetime, right? Those friends of the heart, as we would say, those are the people when we get on the phone, we are chatting for ages. And I've gotten good now where if it's hit like 2, 3 hours and I know I have to do something else, I'm like, all right, I'll talk to you later because I know there's always something else for us to discuss. Where my friends of the road, I talk to them, but I'm rarely talking to them for 2 to 3 hours on the phone. We probably cap it at a cute 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour every once in a while. Doesn't mean I'm not invested, doesn't mean they're not invested, but there's just a different degree. There's just a difference there. And sometimes, right, you can move those friends for a reason, a season into lifetime friends. It depends on the level of investment you're willing to give as well as that person's willing to give. But what's going to be important is to take a step back and maybe lay out who you're friends with, who you want to be closer to, maybe who you're realizing is falling a little bit by the wayside, and take stake in that and figure out how you want to maneuver on the chessboard and tell people if you really want to get closer to someone, you have to tell them that I feel like we are close and we talk about some really deep things and I want to get closer to you. Is that something you're interested in? Something you're willing to do? Here's how I think we can foster even a closer relationship. It might sound cringe at first. This is that metacommunication, communication about communication, but it really is vital. It's important, and it will save time in the long run because maybe you want to get closer to someone and they don't really want to get closer to you. And that's also okay. I've had that where before was somebody here in Philadelphia and we're still friends. We're still friendly, but it became apparent that I was more interested in being closer to this person than they were to me. Because when we would talk about personal matters, I felt like I was doing 21 questions where I had to ask literally a follow-up, a follow-up, a follow-up, a follow-up, a follow-up, instead of usually in friend conversations where things kind of flow. And I remember talking to Kira about that one time, and she was like, oh, well, friendships, they all take time. They're different. And I said, no, I totally agree, girl. I study this. No two friendships are alike. I said, but at some point, we have to cross past this holding of the truth, right? I shouldn't feel like I'm Barbara Walters and I'm interviewing somebody and we're allegedly friends. And she was like, no, that's right. That's true. I said, exactly. I said, so to me, this is kind of a flag waving of the person where they enjoy my company and they like to hang out in this parameter. And I have to decide now if I'm willing to engage and do that, or if because I want more, I maybe need to fall back from this person. And ultimately came to the conclusion that, it's fine because that energy and time I would spend maybe fostering a closer relationship with this individual, I'm now spending fostering a closer relationship with somebody else or investing it in myself or doing something else. So it's going to be important, especially as an adult, to figure those things out for yourself. First and foremost, where are you coming up short? Because oftentimes people love to pull out the shortcomings of others, but we all have shortcomings. So where could I have been a stronger friend or a better friend, or could I have done something differently? First, analyze yourself. Then analyze your relationships, figure out which ones maybe you want to invest a little more in, or ones that maybe you want to invest a little less in, or not at all. And then put your game plan together. How are we going to go about this? Summer has just started. It's July 1st. We have about 2.5 months of the climate catastrophe that we're going to be facing. So maybe we're not hanging out outside, but okay, maybe I'm having some dinner parties or movie nights or game nights. Who do I want to invite? How do I want to foster this? Do I want to have maybe deeper conversations with these people, just not surface level? Let's talk to ourselves. Let's have that self-talk. Let's figure that out. And then let's put a game plan together, because there's no reason why where you are now can't be different than where you are in September. So that is all I will say today on adult friendships. Hopefully you gleaned some gems from what I was dropping. And as always, if you do have a question, a comment, or even a concern, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. A little rusty. It's been a few weeks, right? Well, other than that, I hope you all have a great day or time wherever you are, and I will see you all on the next one. Bye-bye.